But earmuff, you stay on hard.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the BCSN Sportswrap. My name is Brian Fulford, and right there is my man AD Drew, here for another episode. AD, how you feeling today?
As fine as a guy could feel with everything that's going on in our society outside the world of sports right now.
Yeah, most definitely. It's been a tough week, an interesting week. Just all the things that's going on in the world, and then we have some of the news and just things that are coming out in the world. And I wonder sometimes if you and I are active on social media, and we kind of pay attention to things. But I wonder for the person who is not an active social media person, whether it be Facebook or Twitter, if some of the events of this last week seep into their world. You know what I'm saying? Because I think that's something to be thought of and studied. I mean, maybe that person looks at the local news, or maybe they don't. Just something that, I kind of wonder about at times.
What troubles me about this one, Brian, more than some of the other ones, but they've all have troubled me. This guy, George Floyd, was not too much younger than you and I. And he gets treated just like my just now 20-some-odd-year-old son. Some of the kids that I deal with on a regular, in my regular 9 to 5. And that goes to show that it does not matter how old you are. If you have that myth about you, as we as African-American men have about us, some people are intimidated by us. Some people are intimidated by our intelligence. Some people are intimidated by our physical ability. But whatever it is, that systemic racism that people don't see, it does not go away no matter how old you were. This was a man in his mid-40s that this was done to. We've seen it happen with Trayvon Martin and other people, teenagers, people in their early 20s. I mean, damn, who next? My dad? Your dad?
Yeah, it's a serious thought. Sometimes I try not to have thoughts that are sort of the norm. I try to think out of the box at times, and I try to think of things from a different perspective, from a different viewpoint. And then there's times like this that are definitely, they feel senseless and things of that nature. And before we get a little too far into the show, we want to remind you, if you're watching us, or whether you're watching us on Facebook or YouTube, do us a favor and make sure to like and subscribe, not only to our YouTube channel, which of course you're finding on MyJBN Online, but even our Facebook page here, whether you're watching us on our BCSN Sportswrap page or on the Black College Sports Network. We're also available on Instagram, Twitter, and Periscope at MyBCSN1 is where you can find us. And, want to remind you to make sure to like and subscribe, and maybe at the end of the show, leave some comments and thoughts. Let us know what you thought about some of the different segments. I got a big show loaded up with, it's kind of, we can't say it's all sports related, because we're now in that summer where usually you have to kind of create content and find content you never hope that the realities of the world seep into the sports world, but they do. And of course, this past week, as we kind of started the show talking about the events in Minneapolis, Minnesota, the life of a gentleman by the name of George Floyd was taken during a police stop. I'm sure if you have not seen the video, or if you haven't seen the incident from a couple of different vantage points, it's very sad to see.
Very disturbing.
What's also, sad, disturbing, heartbreaking. What's also heartbreaking is some of the post-response that you've seen. There have been rioting and destruction of property in the Minneapolis, Minnesota area, which is always troubling and brings flashbacks to incidents in just our lifetime, maybe not even our parents' lifetime, but just things that we've seen in the '92 LA riots, things we saw in not far from where you grew up, Ferguson, Missouri, which is, how far is Ferguson from St. Louis?
Ferguson is a suburb of St. Louis. Actually, at one point in time in my life, I lived in Ferguson, Missouri. You know, when I was a tot. So the subdivision where he was killed at,
Michael Brown, right?
Michael Brown, yeah, where
right.
Michael Brown was killed at, lived there when I was about 4 or 5 years old. We lived in that Canfield Estates.
Wow.
At that point in time, you know, so that whole neighborhood, I knew about it. And I'm pretty sure just like I can and you can, there are many stories that we could tell of when we've been wrong, either by police or by citizens, just because of the color of our skins, or DWB, driving while black, if you don't understand what that is, you know, whatever it is, you know. And I'm gonna take this moment to do this, Brian. Shout out to the good police officers. All cops are not bad. Probably 95 to 98% of the police officers are good police officers. They do what they have to do. They police their community. They use proper training techniques. You know, I don't know where the hell this guy got this training technique from outside the hood. You know, look like some stuff that you do when you're trying to slaughter a cow or something like that, trying to get a cow to lay down, or a dog to lay down. You know, this is not something that you do to black men. And not all white people are racist. Not all white people are bad, especially not all white cops. I know plenty of them. You know, treated accordingly. So, want to take this time, shout out to all those, and if you see a good cop, thank them for what they do. Thank them for what they do, because garbage like this gives all of them a bad name.
The incident brings up a lot of memories, as you just mentioned. I don't know if it seems like, I hate to use the word fair, but it seems like most black men have had a situation or a story to tell regarding, as you mentioned, DWB. Well, North Carolina Central coach Lavelle Moton, seeing the things happening as it relates to George Floyd and his incident, decided to share on Twitter just the other day, earlier this week, an incident that occurred with he and his friend Raymond Felton, a terrifying police encounter that occurred in 2005. Now, here we are 15 years since then, and this is the first time he sort of have shared this publicly. And in seeing what happened, Coach Moton decided to share on Twitter this, it was probably about maybe a 7 or 8 tweet recap of a police incident in which and at the time, Raymond Felton was just coming out of North Carolina, about to be a first-round NBA draft pick from the University of North Carolina. I believe North Carolina had just won the national title, if I'm not mistaken. And so he was in the car, Felton was in the car with Coach Moten. And so just, there's several tweets here, but just reading the first tweet in this, where Coach Moten says, "This George Floyd issue has triggered my anxiety disorder. In May 2005, I was driving through my old neighborhood in my truck, which had tinted windows, with Raymond Felton as a passenger. In my rear view, I noticed a cop following me. I'm on the phone with my mother, and she says, 'Stay calm.'" This is going into the second tweet now. "Stay calm. Soon after, the cop siren goes off, and I pull over. And he and his partner rush my truck, jerk my door open with guns pulled. He snatches me out of the truck and forces me to spread eagle on my truck. He's kicking my ankles, forcing me to spread my legs wide open. While spread my legs, while his partner is telling me, 'Don't say a bleeping word, effing word.' And they call for backup." So as the story continues to go, Coach Moten describes that while this is happening, Raymond Felton happens to be in the car at that moment talking with his mother while this is all happening. And he also recounts the fact that it's raining that particular night. Moten is pulled out and sat on the curb. And apparently the police officers were looking for, as they say, quote unquote, dope boys, some description of a situation that may have occurred in that area, and they, quote unquote, fit the profile. I hate to say fit the profile. What did I say?
I have to laugh because as you're describing that, my thoughts in my head of incidents where that has happened to me, Ryan.
Well, do you see that? You know what? As I'm listening to it,
There's not a black man who insert same story, insert name.
If you've seen the movie Menace to Society, this same scene happened in Menace to Society, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, either this or Boys in the Hood.
I was gonna say it was one of the two.
Right, one of those two movies, this very incident happened, and I think it happened in. I would roll the dice and say Menace to Society.
With the black cop who's actually doing it is showing off in front of the white cop.
I don't know if he makes reference as to whether one cop is black or white.
No, I'm just saying that's the movie reference. That's the movie reference.
Oh, right.
I'm going into Business Society.
Right. So Moten continues on, and he does make note that by the time backup arrives, the backup police officer recognizes Moten and Felton and says, "No, these aren't the guys." He says, "Hey, that's Coach Moten and that's Raymond Felton." And so at that point, you got an officer that decided to then come over and offer an apology, tried to, he said, "Please accept my apology," blah, blah, blah. But Coach Moten said, "It's the first time in my life I felt less than a man. I never said anything publicly because Ray was entering the draft and I didn't want to impact his draft value." Felton went on to be drafted number 5 overall in the Charlotte Bobcats draft that year. And Moten, who had played at North Carolina Central, he was hired as an assistant there in 2007. So this is, Moten, who was actually playing at North Carolina Central at the time. He hadn't even become a coach yet. He was a ball player and a very good ball player at North Carolina Central. So, I hate to say it, thankfully for those guys, they were known, but still, it shouldn't have come down to that. But that situation, you can just imagine having stuck with Coach Moten for 15 years. And this is the first time that he shared it. And then what I thought was really great, AD, is that he then turned the conversation into a message to NCAA coaches, in which he actually pleaded with the coaches in the NCAA and asked them, especially the Power 5 coaches, You have a lot of athletes who look like George Floyd, African-American men, basically is what he's saying. And he said, it's time that these coaches stand up. And I want to quote him here. He says, many of the student athletes that help feed our families and help create generational wealth for many Power 5 coaches are the complexion of George Floyd. I challenge NCAA coaches to publicly support George Floyd and his family during this tumultuous time and see that justice is brought to his name. He needs you. His family needs you. Your student athletes need you. Black people need you. May God bless you all. I thought that was a very powerful message, Coach Moten. Your thoughts, AD?
I mean, very appropriate. Let's be real, Brian. Just about every HBCU that we cover is not in the best neighborhood, prime real estate of the city in which they are. You and I both know that section of town is policed a little bit differently. When you have that, let's take where we went to school at, Brian. Let's take where we used to go when we used to go to the Moon nightclub. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Tallahassee, Florida, the Moon is an establishment that's probably been around for 40 plus years. It is the premier nightclub in Tallahassee. And remember when we would accidentally go there on the wrong night, Brian, and how we were treated? Think about it. You know I'm telling the truth. And then how the police presence, the security guards' presence was different on their night versus our night. Even though they made more money off of us on our night, we were treated like garbage. But it wasn't just the Moon. Insert nightclub, any nightclub in America, any bar in America, where you have, say, maybe a Hispanic night, a Caucasian night, African American night. Notice the different things that you see on those nights. Got extra security on our night. When there's a fight, they call it for backup. Just different things. If it's them, they're gonna talk them down. If it's us, we going to jail. I could tell you a story very similar to what just happened to Coach Belton and Ray Felton when I was 18 years old. But without this going totally away from what we're here to do, we're here to talk about sports. We're here to talk about HBCU sports, and we're here to offer a distraction to what's going on in the real world. So I will say that story for an appropriate show. But I have no problem going with my own DWB or being Black stories. And trust me, I'm not physically intimidating anybody, Brian. I'm 5'10", 170 pounds. Just think about how small I was when I was in high school. When I was in college. You knew how small I was when I was in college.
Yeah. Well, look, we really hope that, I've seen various I've seen various student athletes, various coaches, not only in the professional level, really make comments on Twitter and all, all of that is great. But, in the end, let's hope that we take that same focus and energy and we challenge the elected leaders in city, local government, state government, national government to make changes that matter towards the treatment of people, and those people who step out of line be appropriately dealt with as as equitably, as equally as anyone else would be. And that's the real challenge. I mean, it's great to talk on Twitter. It's great to throw your support on Twitter and then shut your phone off and turn your phone off and go back to your life. And so it has to be more than just talk. It has to be in the way you treat people, and your messaging has to be consistent. But more importantly, it's your actions. Yeah, actions speak louder than words. So I hope that more coaches, especially Power 5, the major programs, I hope they heard Coach Moten, and I really hope that his message rang or brought some sort of desire to want to be a part of the change. Because as he said, you're making a lot of money. You've made a lot of money. You've changed your family's generational wealth off the talents of young men who look like, in terms of complexion, who look like George Floyd.
I have in me the ability to make you a better you. So if you work hard, focus, stay on point, you can do anything. Trust me.
We made this track to tell everybody they can follow their dreams.
Majesty is a premium health and wellness tea line focused on bringing delicious yet healthy tea blends to the community. Filled with an abundance of vitamins and antioxidants, we work to blend teas with exotic spices and fruits to produce scrumptious and wholesome beverages. So check us out at mymajesties.com. That's MyMajesties.com. My Majesties, an Urban Passport member.
Let's move on, AD, some more new starting coaches. And Florida A&M University has named a new head women's coach after a search that took probably, I'd say, about a month, month and a half. FAMU has now their third coach in 3 years. And this time it's Coach, and I hope I'm saying her first name right, Shalon Pillow. She was the assistant coach at Middle Tennessee State for the last 5 seasons, I believe, working under Hall of Fame coach Rick Insell. Rick Insell had a 340 and 121 record at Middle Tennessee State. Also had an impressive high school coaching career as well. And Pillow played a key role in helping Middle Tennessee State to 5 postseason appearances while she was there. She was also an assistant coach at the University of Kentucky, University of South Florida, and also, I believe, Hofstra. She was an assistant there as well. So about 15 years experience. She's won a couple of conference championships. Some of the players that she's helped recruit have had some success. She is a 6'3". When she was in college, now here's the better part here, or maybe the more interesting part for some. She played at the University of Tennessee. She's 6'3", so in coaching circles, she primarily coaches and works with the post players. But at Tennessee, she attended Tennessee from 1998 to 2002. Of course, played for Coach Summit. And during her playing career, Tennessee's teams went 100. I think it was 125-12 during that time. She went to the NCAA tournament 4 years in a row. Went to the Final Four twice. Was a national runner-up in one of those years. Won 4 SEC championships in all 4 years she was at Tennessee.
I was going to say, for those who don't realize how good Tennessee used to be, especially some of our younger viewers. Tennessee back then is what UConn women basketball is of today. That's where UConn was striving to be at that point in time.
Right when she was coming in was sort of you could almost say the changeover where things were the
changing of the
90s
guard.
and 80s were really all about Tennessee. And then as the new decade and new millennium came, UConn started to, move into that world as being the dominant program as they become over the next 15, 20 years. I thought it interesting, Coach Pillow, if there was a sort of a Mount Rushmore or the starting five, the top 5 players in University of Tennessee history, she played with 3 of them. She played 1 season with Shamika Holdsclaw, who I believe was the 2-time National Player of the Year. Holdsclaw led Tennessee to an undefeated season in '98, the year before Coach Pillow came. They went 39-0. Also on that team was a freshman by the name of Tamika Catchings. And Coach Pillow would play 3 seasons with Tamika Catchings, who also became, not only did she become a National Player of the Year, went on to become actually a Hall of Famer this past year. She's actually in the Hall of Fame class with Kobe Bryant, Tim Duncan, and who's the other one? Kevin Garnett.
KG.
Yeah, and KG. And after Coach Pillow, the year after, guess who came in? Kara Lawson. The point guard, Kara Lawson came in, and so she spent 3 seasons with Kara Lawson, 3 seasons with Tamika Catchings, and 1 season with Shamika Holdsclaw. If you had to say a top 5 of Tennessee greats, those 5 or those 3 ladies would be in the top 5. And then I'm gonna throw a name out here, and if you really know women's basketball, you've heard of the name Samika Randall. Samika Randall was also 3 seasons with Coach Pillow as well, and she was in Tamika Catchings' class. So she played with her, and Randall would probably be that next group of great players at Tennessee.
She'd be second team.
Yeah. So AD, what's your thoughts on the hire, and do you think a hire like Coach Pillow, with the pedigree that she had and the assistant background that she has, do you think it's the kind of thing that'll translate in the Florida A&M University women's basketball space?
Well, time will tell on that. But as far as the hire itself, Brian, this hire is probably as big for FAMU as the Mo Williams hire on the men's side was for Alabama State. She outside of playing in the WNBA, she actually has a better resume than Mo Williams has coming into Alabama State. No slight against Mo Williams for his resume, but when you look at what she brings to the table, I question if it took this long to hire her with this resume. I want to see who some of the other finalists were, where they had to pick this one out. Who else was going up for this job? Because this is a hell of a resume. Most schools, let alone HBCU, don't get people to apply with all these accolades. Now, she's a first-time head coach, just like we said with Mo Williams. The hardest transition that you make as a coach are those 24 inches from chair 2 to chair 1. So just like with Mo Williams, it's going to be the assistants that she hired, the system that she puts in place, that's going to make the difference. We're going to have to give her a pass on this year, Brian. We know recruiting is pretty much a toss-up. It's like cooking a spaghetti in the pot. You pull it out the pot. If it stick to the wall, you go ahead and eat it. That's what recruiting is going to be like for this year. So we're going to have to give her a pass on this year.
Well, and I'll add, the previous coach had done a lot of the recruiting already for this group. So I don't know how many actual spots are still left open, but you almost got to say she's walking in with a group of players that she didn't recruit. So she's basically got what she has to work with, and she's going to have to make something out of that. And then, of course, given all the COVID-19 stuff, you go into this year and you're going to find out who's buying into your system this year. And based on who buys into your system this year, you'll come away finding out, do I need to keep them? How do I keep them? Where do I go? So on and so forth. So, yeah, it'll be an interesting year for Coach Pillow. And I believe at some point next week, I know I'll get an opportunity to have a conversation with her. And so I'll get a chance to kind of ask her, not only Pat Summit, but what it's like playing with four great players like Shamika Holdsclaw, Tamika Catching, Samika Randall, and Carol Lawson. So it'll be interesting to find out whether, you know, that kind of pedigree, does it matter to young recruits this day? Because I think who you are and where you came from, sometimes that matters. Not only does the program and the school matter, but I think your background and who you know, will she be able to go into a home and get on the phone and say, hey, I know Tamika Catchings. Hold on, let me get on the phone. Tamika, let me talk to this young lady. Tell her, and then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, Tamika, you know what I'm saying? I don't know how all that works. And it'll be –
especially as these young ladies who are getting recruited now have grown up with the WNBA and seeing some of these players play in the WNBA. So, they idolize players like Shamika Holdsclaw, like we did players like Michael Jordan back in our days, or Isaiah Thomas, or Reggie Miller for you.
Yeah, well, that's 20 years ago, though. See, Holdsclaw, Catchings, Randall, Carol Lawson's on TV, so maybe they know her as the lady who's on TV, but that's 20 years ago. Yeah, that's 20 years ago. These kids probably weren't even – no, they weren't. They weren't born.
At least the freshmen weren't. Maybe the seniors, but not the freshmen.
Even if they were born, they may not have been paying attention. So,
well, actually, hold on. Let's look at this. She graduated in 2002. 2002 was the year that this high school senior class was born.
Right. So, well, who knows? Maybe. We'll see. All right. We will talk a little bit about the upcoming schedule as it relates to what the NCAA is sort of do, how some of the HBCUs might be taking advantage of that schedule, and then also kind of just taking a look at what some other schools are doing, because they bring up some interesting models that HBCUs may be employing here in the upcoming months as everyone tries to figure out how to function and how to get back on campus for the fall while dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. You're watching the BCSN Sports Wrap right here on the Black College Sports Network with Brian and
It didn't. What happened was a gentleman wanted to do the Black College Sports Network in partnership with the HBCU for these black colleges.
Absolutely.
And it would have educated the Black College Sports Network. This is what he wanted to do. That would have educated a lot of black kids. Okay. That was the real reason why I got into it, was when I saw what happened with the Black College Sports Network,
The Creole seasoning is a sodium-free and sugar-free blend that's versatile enough to put on anything. One of the first blends I developed more than 8 years ago, the Creole seasoning has an unmistakable aroma, a bold flavor, and a little heat for character. Every time I open one of these bottles, I hear trumpets and big band music.
It's like a loop machine. All around town, trying to get down.
All right, welcome back to the BCSN Sports Wrap. Brian Fulford, AD Drew here. You want to follow AD on Twitter. You can find him at BCSN Drew. You can find me at DRB365. Of course, I want to remind you, follow the Black College Sports Network on Instagram, Periscope, Twitter, and Facebook. You can find us all using the at MyBCSN1. And of course, if you're watching us on YouTube or even on one of our Facebook pages, make sure to like our channel, like our page, and go ahead and subscribe to the channel. And that way you can be updated as well on any time we have a new show that we put out. So AD, the Division I Council has set June 1, which coming up next week, matter of fact, as the start date, right, for voluntary athletic activities, football and basketball, for a lot of schools, and specifically as long as, the schools can work it out with local, state, and federal regulations. You've got schools and conferences that can begin to plan and begin having quote unquote voluntary workouts. Now, some of the parameters include allowing 8 hours per week of virtual non-physical activities through the end of June. So I guess that essentially is talking about maybe like team meetings or things of that nature. The SEC, and talking about the conference-wide level, SEC schools are going to begin on June 8th, allowing schools to kind of operate within their own starting timeline, same as the Pac-10. I just read a press release by the SWAC that the SWAC and its member schools are kind of letting them decide what they want to do and start on their own time frame. I've seen different plans from schools like, I can't say I've really seen any quote unquote plans from specific plans, I should say, from any HBCU schools, but there are schools out there, University of Louisville, who are putting out some very elaborate plans and working on different stages and even asking their athletes to do a lot of testing. So AD, as we kind of think about this June 1 date, is there anything that does it sound like if you were a student athlete and you're hearing, hey, voluntary workouts start in June, are you rushing to go back on campus? Are you rushing to get back to get back into whatever kind of normalcy you might have been used to? What are your thoughts?
It depends on my personal situation. Obviously we know being on campus, being away from home is a better situation for some of our students than for others. So if that's the situation that I'm coming from, I'm hopping on the first megabus back to campus. Hopping in the car, going back up to campus. If I have something where I could work out with in my own community, one thing we need to look at is high schools opening in some of these states where these people are at. If I'm a college athlete and I can get back to my old high school, get back into my old high school weight room or something like that, it may be more beneficial for me to stay at home right now and work out at home, lift weights at home versus going back on campus, at least initially doing that first wave. Me, I'm gonna holler at y'all. I'm gonna let y'all go. I'm gonna let y'all be the guinea pigs. I'm gonna sit back a couple weeks. Then I'm gonna start hanging out. Yeah, I've been running coach. I'll be on the Zoom meeting, but I'm uncomfortable. My mom's uncomfortable. My dad's uncomfortable. Whatever it is, because these things I'm telling you is how some of these kids are gonna be. You got some kids gonna be ready to go. You got some kids who are gonna be cautious. You're gonna have some kids who are ready to go, but mommy, daddy, grandpa, whoever raised them are going to tell them to be cautious. And you got to keep this. One last thing, you got to keep this in mind. When they go, they may not be able to come back because they're exposing themselves to possible the virus. And if I have a 60, 70-year-old grandparent or uncle or somebody in my household, I have to know leaving that I may not be able to go back home because I don't want to be a potential carrier to my loved ones back in my hometown.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to add into that mix is I had heard a report, and I haven't been able to narrow down the specific school where this is coming out of, but potentially student athletes may have to sign some sort of waiver or medical clearance waiver as they come back, which I would imagine sort of says something to the extent of, while the school is promising to give you this safe environment, we won't be held responsible should something happen. As you promise to do what you're supposed to do, meaning you promise not to go get into a pool party surrounded by 100, 200 other students. As long as you promise to do things safely according to guidelines, we'll do our part. But in the worst case scenario, if you do happen to catch COVID-19, you won't sue us.
Fault. It ain't my fault.
Yeah, it ain't our fault. So
and Brian, and it's interesting that you bring that up. For those who may not know, I'm a Parks and Recreation director. I deal with Parks and Recreation on a daily basis. You bring up that waiver. We have had to add that waiver onto the regular waiver, saying, the regular liability waiver that you sign when you play both athletic competitions. We have had to come up with a separate COVID waiver to make sure that we're covered by our insurance carrier. And most of the universities will probably have to do the same to make sure that they're covered by their insurance carriers, so that the university does not get sued, and or the conference does not get sued, and or the opponent that they're playing does not get sued.
So I mentioned, one of the schools, I came across, and just, obviously this is hard to compare. Now, HBCUs have limited facilities or limited resources, and maybe smaller facilities than, say, a University of Louisville. But just to kind of think about what a school like the University of Louisville is putting in place, and now you try to imagine a scale of that for an HBCU, and now you think about some of the challenges that HBCUs are going to be dealing with. So the Louisville plan, I guess one of the first phases has to deal with about 30 football players, 15 men and women's basketball athletes who will be allowed to work out on campus facilities beginning June 8th. Now that's following testing and a physical exam on June 3rd. So those athletes will return to campus and will be required to quarantine for 11 days before getting back in the gym. So think about that. You come into campus on a June 3rd, you're on quarantine for 11 days. That's before you can even get in the gym. So now you're talking,
14th.
Yeah, which is like the 14th, and then there is a second phase. As I scroll down here, the second phase will proceed, in which they'll bring in another 30 football players, as well as 60 Olympic sport athletes back to campus on June 10th. So, and now those players have to go through an 11-day cycle of being quarantined, which means they actually can't start until the 22nd. So, and then there's a third phase that they would bring in the rest of the football team by July 6th. And so with them, then they say voluntary workouts don't begin until July 18th. And athletes will return to campus and have access to the facilities in July or August, with practices and scrimmages as allowed by NCAA or conference guidelines. And then I think if likely phase 3. Well, they already mentioned what phase 3 was. That was the last group. So now imagine that scenario, AD. Now, what HBCU? We haven't seen anything come out in terms of plans. But if you just imagine that a plan like Louisville, a school like Louisville is doing a plan like that, it makes you wonder how likely is a Florida A&M, a Prairie View, a Grambling, a North Carolina A&T, how likely are they to implement a similar plan, or do they have their own plans?
Brian, you just named schools that could probably do it because they have the facilities, the dorm spaces, et cetera, et cetera. Let's take some of our other schools. Let's take a Tuskegee. Let's take a Lane. Let's take a Johnson C. Let's take some of our smaller schools.
Well, you're talking division. Let me hold on. You're talking. You just brought up Division II schools. Now,
correct.
I don't even know if Division II schools can do anything like this. I haven't seen any mention of a Division II school yet. Have you?
No.
Yeah. So
I'm pretty sure they've got those. They've got similar type. They have to be planning just like everybody else.
Yeah, it's one of the curious things that, obviously the NCAA, they have Division I, II, and III. And
what are NAIA schools doing?
Well, yeah, I mean, we'd have to look and see and find out what they're doing.
We've got Edward Waters. We've got Langston. We've got Texas College. We've got Virginia Lynchburg. We've got Allen, all with football teams, and I think and we've got Florida Memorial.
Yeah. Well, look, it is interesting, and I guess we'll have to kind of. I have not seen anything come out from those first off from the NAIA. Haven't seen anything. Haven't seen anything come out from those schools, and what I guess concerns me a little bit and makes you a little uneasy is that you don't see any announcements coming out. I'm not saying that nobody is planning, but you don't see any proclamations or any press releases about this is our plan, this is what we're going to do.
Two things, Brian. Two things. No one wants to be first, because if you're first, you got a chance to get it wrong first. Nobody really won't. I don't think any of those schools wants to be the leader of the pack, because let's be real.
It's a horrible thought.
We can't afford to screw this up. We don't have the capital where if we screw it up, we can go back and fix it. And when I say we, our HBCUs, we've got to get it right the first time. So we've got to go into this extra conservative and to sit on this for as long as possible. Now, we know those schools all have plans, and those plans are very fluid, and they're changing on a daily, sometimes hourly basis. But who's going to be the first one to put it on paper? I guarantee you, if whoever put a plan on paper in April is probably mad because that plan that they put on paper in April is long gone. So I don't think anybody's really going to write it down until they have to. Until it gets down to crunch time where they've got to do it. They've got the thoughts in their head, they've got the notes, but actually drafting it on paper, until it's got to be out, who's going to do it? We don't even know if we're going to have a football season. But
right, I hate that you are correct in that thought. I hate that thinking, but you are correct for this very point, and in a point that I was saving, and I'm glad you brought up what you did, because it probably matters in relation to me bringing up the University of Louisville and their plan, because, Louisville is planning to do a lot of testing with not only their athletes, but their coaches. And their athletic director even comes out and states in this particular article that Louisville's in sort of a unique position in that they have access to testing. Because as he mentions here, and I got to find the quote from the athletic director, where he basically mentioned, AD, that because they have access to testing, because I guess whether it be at the University of Louisville or maybe somebody in Louisville, that there's a private company that has created testing kits. They sort of made those testing kits available to the university. So it's like the university can get testing whenever they want to. Not every school is going to have that advantage.
Does Louisville have a hospital? When I say hospital, the University of have a hospital? That may be also an advantage that they have.
Yeah, well, all I know is here, he says, quote unquote, we're fortunate at the University of Louisville, there's tests that are produced here. So I'm assuming whether it be through their research or through their medical, if they do have a hospital, that is interesting, something to kind of consider, and something that's very unique to that school. While we're talking about the NCAA, did you see and I sent this to you, there was recently an NCAA survey that was sent to student athletes, and this was sent back in April, like April 10th to May 1st is sort of when this survey was sent and replies were requested. But 37,000 student athletes on the Division 1, 2, and 3 level responded to this survey, and it had to do in large part to their mental health and how they were just feeling about COVID-19 and things happening at their school. And just some of the bullet points I pulled out of this, AD, of the 37,000 student responses, while 82%, which is a good number, reported feeling positive and very positive about the support they're receiving from their coaches, 33% experienced sleep difficulties. More than 25% reported feeling sadness and a sense of loss. And 1 in 10 reported feeling so depressed it has been difficult to function, quote unquote, constantly, or quote, most every day. 4 and 5 cited local regulations and a lack of access to appropriate facilities as barriers to their athletics training. Now, you talked about, guys having access, guys and girls having access to gyms and things. Now, this was done back in April and May. So, obviously it's a little bit different than what we're seeing happening in June. So that may be less of a hindrance. And then there was a segment in this that I thought would be relative to our students, to HBCU students even. And this wasn't, I don't know numbers of HBCU students in this survey, but we know all of the HBCU schools that fall into the D1 and D2 category. This is Black and Latino student athletes in the sample were more likely to agree that a fear of exposure to COVID-19 is a barrier of training. 50% Black, 53% Latino, than white students who surveyed. That number was 41%. Additionally, Black and Latino participants were more likely to cite family or personal responsibilities as a barrier to training. That was 40%. That's something I think you mentioned. As compared with white student athletes who were at 27%. And those in other racial categories was at 34%. So just kind of summarizing what you kind of brought up is that hindrance about, things at home, and then, access to, fear of exposure as being things that students were worried out. I wonder, AD, if you poll those same students over the next 2 weeks, how much of that survey changes?
Correct. One thing along those lines, Brian, talking about mental health. This is sort of we were going to bring up later in the conversation, but I'll go ahead and bring it in here now. The SIAC on May 28th and May 29th, which is May 29th when we're actually recording this, had a virtual mental health summit for student athletes to learn and explore about mental health issues. This article goes on to tell about who's going to be conducting this, but it says the health and wellness of our student athletes remains a paramount concern of all SIAC stakeholders, said Commissioner Greg Moore. In light of this fact, and in an effort to help mitigate the mental health impacts related to the current crisis, we are extremely thankful to partner with #SameHereMovement and Let's Talk About Mental Health to facilitate a constructive discussion and provide students with useful tools and approaches to support them during this difficult time. So this was a 2-paragraph press release by the SIAC, but I think it was I think it was pretty good to have it out there. So the SIAC is doing their part, and I'm pretty sure the other conferences are doing something along the same lines to help deal with the mental health issues, because that's probably been one of the biggest challenges that we've had with this COVID-19 issues. Because we've all had cabin fever, Brian.
For sure.
We've all had that paranoia about, do I need to go out? Do I need to put my mask on? Oh, what the hell with it? I ain't worried about it today. We've had those mood swings and everything else along with COVID-19. Add just life in general to that. How am I gonna pay this bill? Or they gonna cut off my lights because I don't have a job anymore? Because my mom don't have a job anymore because she got laid off because she was working down at Golden Corral or something like that during this time. Add that stress to the stress that I'm on scholarship and I've got to be able to perform in order to maintain my scholarship because I can't afford to pay for all this school by myself. I understand the challenges.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I think goes into that challenge, there recently a report that I saw a tweet from Pete Thamel of Yahoo Sports, who sent a tweet that he has sources that said the NCAA Football Oversight Committee had a meeting the other day, and they appear to be heading towards a recommendation of a 6-week preseason football camp model for this upcoming year. Now, of course, they still have to come up with what that would look like and before they make a formal presentation to the D1 Council. But let's just talk about, usually you have about a 4-week preseason camp before you start your first week of practices, quote unquote. The first week when school starts or something like that.
Before your first game.
Before your first game, thank you.
Yes, before your first game.
So now you're going to move that to 6 weeks, which it sounds like you're adding 2 weeks on, which essentially is about, maybe you'd say, those 2 weeks that you missed from spring football.
Correct.
But there are some schools who I can think of, and I can think of Savannah State off the top of my head, who had their spring practice from mid to late February, that got their spring practice in, had their orange and blue game, and then all of a sudden the world shut down in May, whereas other schools were kind of just getting started with their spring practice in March.
You said May, you meant March.
Correct. So can you imagine somebody like Savannah State getting a 6-week camp after already fortunately getting their spring their spring practices in? That's a school that you have to really think about when you come into preseason selections and saying, what teams are you favoring and who you're going to favorite early in games. A team who's had extra rep. I know Grambling started a couple practices, some other schools I can think of off the top. And then there's others who didn't even get started.
There will probably be some type of formula where they go back and subtract days off based upon what you were able to do in the spring.
That's interesting. Yeah, that'd be a fair thing to do, right?
Yeah, you gotta have it because you know some schools had 3-4 days in, some schools got a weekend. Like I said, some schools never got started at all, and some schools completed. But whatever it is, it's going to have to be longer than the 3 weeks that you normally get because most of these kids are going to come in dog out of shape. You know, you're going to need that entire 6 weeks or 5 of those 6 weeks just to get back in shape. Makes you wonder if they're going to allow them to go back to 2-a-days. You know, 2-a-days are a thing of the past now, Brian. So
are 2-a-days a day in the past because the NCAA outlawed them, or is it just that schools decided to kind of?
No, the NCAA has changed their regulations. You can only have so many hours a day. So you know, right now you can only have so many padded practices.
Yeah.
During the time because of concussions, safety concussion protocols and things like that. All that has to go into this 6-week plan. How many padded practices are they going to allow you to have? How many practices are they going to allow you to have in general? How much contact outside of practice? You know, that your weight room and everything like that. And if school is in, does the 20-hour limit still apply for those in summer school? Because you know, during summer school, you can only have 20. You can only be around your kids 20 hours per week. When school is out, depending on when it is.
You're talking about right now during the summer.
During summers for those, doing those kids in summer school, because this is gonna filter over into summer school, and also
you're talking about. Well, the thing, it sounds like you're talking about two things. You're talking about the voluntary workouts, and you're talking about
this 6-week camp.
Well, that 6-week camp would probably start.
It would have to start in July.
Yeah,
which is towards the end of summer, which is halfway through summer school. You have to start this right after the 4th of July holiday to get 6 weeks in.
That's a good point. And then
depending on your start date.
You know what? I didn't even think of like the University of Louisville, where they were talking about they weren't starting until I think I said mid-July.
I think you said July 18th or something along that line.
Right. So keep you know, did somehow keep that date in mind. Circle that date in the back of your mind. Did the University of Louisville just kind of give a hint away about something that may be happening down the road? I don't know. You know, that's an interesting date that they have.
That's about 6 weeks from Labor Day, which is a traditional opening day for college football.
So I want to give you one more thing here as it relates to, we're talking about possibilities and school calendars and just things that we're kind of waiting to see, will HBCUs adopt similar models? Well, how about the modified calendar that I'm starting to see some colleges announce? I've seen schools such as Purdue University release a modified calendar, but more specifically, I saw a real interesting modified calendar for the upcoming school year released by Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana, in which they are essentially, and I'm going to shorten this up as best as I can. They're going to start their fall semester in late August until Thanksgiving. So around November 30th, that's when the first semester will end, up until Thanksgiving. There's no fall break. So basically go from early August up until November. Then they're taking almost a 2-month window from November 30th to February 7th, where there basically will be no students on campus, no campus classes, any classes that students would not return for spring semester until January 19th, but they won't start classes until February 8th. And then they'll go from February 8th, there'll be no spring break and they'll go to some point into the end of May. So what I initially, and share your thoughts on this if you will, AD. The couple of things I thought about is I thought it kind of interesting that you're taking away fall and spring break, which you don't let your students get away in other places in large groups or go back home or do things that, or, you know, where they, you know, Mardi Gras, for example, or spring break. But then you also give them that period in the winter time where
flu season.
Yes, exactly. Let's just say there is another spike or some sort of flu thing. Well, now you're taking them away from being around each other and you're letting them be in smaller segments around. You know, I hate to say it, if you're going to get sick, you're going to get sick in your home. You're only infecting maybe a couple of people versus hundreds of people. And then you come back the second semester, no spring break, you're all together again. What's your thought on that calendar as you think about
it? It sucks for the basketball team, Brian. Basketball season gets started second week of November, right?
It does.
I mean,
winter sports are stuck. Winter sports are screwed. They're not getting away from campus.
Why you playing Little Sisters of the Poor during the preseason of basketball? You have nobody there to watch you play Little Sisters of the Poor and all the directional schools doing pre-basketball. Then you go into conference season, which usually starts the 1st of January. So the first month of conference season, there's nobody there. You know, I've been on campus as a basketball coach when we've had Thanksgiving tournaments, Christmas tournaments, or had to travel during those times. Brother, it is lonely when nobody else is on campus, but you and these 15 other people that you got to see all the time in practice.
Got to find some locals to hang with.
That's the one thing you don't want to do at most of these schools is find some locals, because that's what gets you in trouble. But, you know, I mean, maybe a good thing for the men's team, all the girlfriends are gone and all that stuff. But, you know, it's tough, man. It's tough, and I've been a part where because of the quirk of the schedule, we've had home games where there's literally been nobody there except the people at the table, 1 or 2 mom and dads, and the security people. You know, the free admission game. You beg. The local school district is not even in during some of this time, so you can't even get the high school kids or the elementary kids to come in and cheer for you. You know, I've coached in those games, Brian. It's ugly.
So as I guess, so the big question is, when you think of a calendar like that, you have to, you know, it sucks for your student athletes in your winter sports, but at the same time, you're worried more about your larger population. You know, it's unfortunate, and I hate to say tough, those are sort of the sad, tough breaks of being a winter sports student athlete.
Winter sports are already tough enough. Basketball is the only 2-semester sport. Those athletes have it the toughest because they have to do their things over 2 semesters.
Right. So I mean that they're already in a tough spot. I just wonder, you know, would certain concessions be allowed? You know, with those guys and women, and we're talking. Primarily, we're talking men's and women's basketball, but at some schools, you may be talking wrestling, swimming. Okay, didn't think about that. What else might be happening in the winter season?
That's pretty much indoor track.
Indoor track and field, maybe?
Yeah, indoor track.
Indoor track.
Yeah.
And
now, think about this, Brian. The NCAA just, you know, stated that you could cut the number of games, or mandated that you cut the number of games that you play during that time down to, I believe it's 22 for basketball.
For Division II.
for Division II, and I think Division I is going to follow probably a similar model.
No,
They're
too much money. I haven't read anything that they're going to cut. There was too much money involved. You got conferences that are playing 20-game schedules. So I think at the most I've seen 2 games or, something like that.
So, let's think about our Division I schools. Let's think about our Gramblings, our FAMUs, A&Ts, Hamptons. They are going to still have to house these kids, pay for their bills if they follow a similar plan to this for damn near 3 months, Brian.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. So I just
extra money out the budget.
It'll be interesting to see what schools come out with over the next month. I think some key dates. Obviously, July 1 will be a key date for a lot of schools. So I would imagine during the month of June, we're going to start to hear about what these schedules look like. And I think when you see models like Indiana, I bet you anything, there's a lot of schools looking at what they're doing and what they put out there, and they're saying, I wonder, could we do that? Trust me, we talked about earlier being the first one out there, and sometimes what goes with that is it's a bold decision that they made, but they made it, and now guess what? Now you get these months of trying to plan to figure out how you're going to do it. So we'll be staying tuned to see what our HBCUs do over the course of the month going into the month of June. AD, let's take a break, and when we come back, we've got some preseason football stuff. You know how much I love preseason lists. I love them. Yeah,
that's an oxymoron.
Yeah. So we got some preseason information to talk about, as well as some other news and notes, and then we're gonna do another top 5 towards the end of the show here, as we kind of look back on the past year.
Top 5 with a twist.
Make sure to stay tuned for that. You're watching the BCSN Sports Wrap with Brian and AD. We'll be back right after these words.
For my people that don't get to see me, trying to remind you who you are, just like in Romans 3. See, we about to blow across the world just like a day that's breezy. This motivation for the people and this classic Bible teaching say, make this for my people that don't get to see me, trying to remind you who you are, just like in Romans 3. See, we about to blow across the world just like a day that's breezy. This motivation for the people and this classic Bible teaching, motivation.
Q Time is a classic Atlanta soul food restaurant located in the historic West End. Q Time Soul Food is a family business started by Fred and Christine Crenshaw. Come on in, relax, and sink your chops into our tantalizing, mouth-watering, distinctive soul food with a twist, the Q Time way. 1120 Ralph David Abernathy Boulevard, or call your order in at 404-758-2881. Do you miss your mama's cooking? Then come on down to Q Time, an Urban Passport member.
It's like a loop machine. All around town, people trying to get down.
Welcome back to the BCSN Sports Wrap. Brian and AD Drew here, and want to make sure you follow the Black College Sports Network on Twitter, Instagram, Periscope, Facebook, YouTube. Most of those places you can find us at MyBCSN1. That's Twitter, Instagram, Periscope, Facebook at MyBCSN1. On YouTube, take a look at MyJBN Online. That's where you can find all of the shows, the Black College Sports Network and the BCSN Sports Wrap. We are a part of the Jericho broadcast networks. And MyJBN Online is where you can not only find our shows, but other great shows on the Jericho broadcast networks and other family of shows there as well. So on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel so that way you can always get the latest updates on when we drop new shows. If you're following us on Facebook, go ahead and like and make sure you are a part of our page and our network of folks. And also, you can also download our app, the JBN app. You can just go to whether it be the iStore as well as Google Play. I don't have an iPhone, so I don't even know.
Apple on the App Store.
App Store, Apple App Store. Just search my JBN, and that's where you can find the Jericho Broadcast Network's app. Okay, AD, you know how much I love preseason lists. I love preseason All-American teams and top 25 rankings. I think in one respect they're great for conversation, but oftentimes they leave off people. And so a lot of these lists and things like this are I think they're all a product of last year, not really taken into account. It's obviously it is what they is. It's talking points, just to give us something to talk about. So the good people at Hero Sports were the first to drop their preseason All-American team into FCS, as well as their preseason top 25 FCS teams, their top 25 rankings for FCS teams. And so when we're talking FCS, we're really talking about the MEAC, SWAC, Hampton, Tennessee State. That's who primarily we're talking about, those 20 or 21 teams. And of course, as you can sadly predict, there are very few HBCU players. But we do want to mention those who made the list. And so first team offense, you got senior running back Jermaine Martin of North Carolina A&T, who I think that's a fair assumption. We kind of expect him to have a good season. But also on first team defense, you have junior Jermaine McDaniel of North Carolina A&T, who's a defensive lineman. The first team special teams consist of two HBCU players, senior Chris Badul of FAMU, who's a punter, and then senior Colton Minguez, who's a long snapper for Alcorn State. So yeah, that's the first team. Second team offense, junior Xavier Smith, who's a wide receiver from FAMU. Second team defense, senior Roderick Perry of South Carolina State, who's a defensive lineman. Now they have three teams, so there's a third team here. Third team offense consists of senior quarterback Felix Harper of Alcorn State and Forbes of FAMU. Third team defense consists of junior Keontae Hampton, who's a linebacker for Jackson State, and senior Sean Steele, who's a defensive back for Arkansas Pine Bluff. Well, AD, off the top of your head, can you think of anybody who's missing that you would have put on your preseason FCS All-American? Because I sure can.
I know who you're going to go with. and I don't want to steal that one.
Steal it if that's who you're thinking of. Now, if you're thinking of somebody.
Here's the debate. You've got a quarterback on here. Who's the best quarterback coming back into HBCU football? Is it Felix Harper or is it Quail Glass of Alabama A&M? If you've only got one spot for a quarterback, which one is it?
Okay, so I'm going to be a little I'm going to be a fanboy for Akil Glass because first off, I think it's shameful that a guy who threw for 3,600 yards and the numbers that he put up last year is not a preseason first, second, or third team. Now I don't know and I'm going to do the stats on these other guys team categories. I understand Felix Harper had a great year. He came out of nowhere, and I think that's why he won the SWAC Offensive Player of the Year. But the best quarterback statistically was Akil Glass. I'd say they were neck and neck, but in terms of like yardage I think Akil Glass had the better numbers. And he played 12 games now, and I think Harper started 12 games, and I think Harper only started 10. So there's a little, there's that. But I understand why Harper won the Offensive Player of the Year. I don't, look, it was a hell of a story last year. But I'm going to put my money on Glass, who's the bigger quarterback. And I'm just amazed that he didn't make this list. That's all. Just a bit shocked, to be honest. Any other names that you thought of that maybe?
And you have to forgive me because I'm looking this up right now because I just saw this list right before we went on the air, and trying to see if some of the players. I've got some players in my mind, but I can't remember if they had any eligibility remaining.
Who are you thinking of? And let me see if I can help you out.
I'm thinking about there was a receiver over at Alabama State. I want to say Jefferson was his name.
Well, there's a couple of receivers at Alabama. Wait a minute, Alabama State?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a tough one.
Alabama. But what about Alabama A&M?
Alabama A&M had a couple of guys over there as well. That whole offense was killing last year. And let's see, they had 2,000-yard receivers last year at Alabama A&M.
Right.
And I think both of them are coming back. They only lost Jordan Bentley in terms of that offensive receiver, running back, quarterback triumvirate group. They lost Jordan Bentley to graduation, but the other guys were coming back. Zabrian Moore was coming back. He was one of the main guys. I can't think of the other names off the top of my head. Defensively, I'm a bit surprised the safety from Florida A&M, who's a sophomore, didn't get some consideration. Marquise Bell. It took me a second to remember his name. I think he's going to be a sophomore. I'm surprised he didn't get some consideration. I believe he.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I believe he was a first-team All-MEAC.
What about Xavier Lofton at UAPB, linebacker? Had a pretty good year last year also.
I don't know I can't recall what his numbers were. So, I'm in the dark on that one.
See if I can pull them up.
But it just we're not going to see an over. Remember, Hero Sports is doing all FCS. So, obviously, you got a lot of, if you did a conference breakdown and said, hey, which conference, pulled in the most, well, you've got from the MEAC, you got 3, 4, 5, 6 players from the MEAC, and you have 4 from the SWAC. Now, you go compare that to the other conferences, and then let's see how it shakes out. Maybe the average is 7 or 6, and so in that respect, hey, that's good for the guys out of the MEAC, But it'll be interesting. I know the other publications that'll come out, I know Stats FCS will do one later in terms of all FCS. And then, of course, you'll have the Black College Media All-Americans, and, we'll see. Who knows? Maybe AD will talk me into getting behind us doing a preseason All-American team this year. The one thing I really do despise, though, more than All-American preseason teams, are rankings. So let me give the Hero Sports top 25 rankings. And of course, you don't see an HBCU until you get to number 19, where you see North Carolina A&T ranked, and their summary of North Carolina A&T goes as such. The Aggies have won the past 3 Celebration Bowls, and it doesn't seem that this program will be slowing down its last year in the MEAC. Yes, it'll need to reload at the signal caller position, but there is talent back on offense, and the defense looks stout once again. That's about as nice a generic paragraph as you can come up with about a team. Would it be? I mean, you know.
Until you read the next paragraph.
Oh, okay. Okay. Number 20, Florida A&M comes in preseason ranked 20 by Hero Sports. And their recap says the Rattlers look like they'll have as good a team on campus in more than a decade. Losing talented quarterback Ryan Stanley does hurt, but at almost every other position, this FAMU team looks solid, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Now, wouldn't it seem look, I don't know. You wouldn't it seem in talking about the number of guys returning, you make mention of the fact that, you know, you got 3 guys from A&T. How many guys from A&T made that All-American team? 3 or 4?
You got 1, 2 first teamers.
Two first teamers. So
and
one on offense.
FAMU has a first teamer and a second teamer.
Yeah,
and a third teamer. FAMU has somebody on all 3 teams.
Wouldn't it seem like you make mention of those guys' names? You know, just saying. And then I should know Alcorn State came into the receiving votes category, which means basically they are outside of the top 25. But again, AD, that's why I don't like to do preseason rankings. The BCSN, our official rankings don't come out until October. But I'm sure there will be people asking us to tell them preseason rankings and things like that.
We'll put out our preseason poll, and then we'll sit on it until October.
Okay. You know what? I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. You know, I think we can do that. I'd be fine with that. All right. Some other news from out of the world of HBCUs. How about this? Kalen Newton, the former Howard University quarterback, not only was the MEAC Rookie of the Year, but it was also the MEAC Offensive Player of the Year his sophomore year. And then with a new coach, about 3 or 4 games in, decided that this ship is one that I need to get off of. So he basically made his intentions known, but he would not be playing any more football, would put his name in the transfer portal and be looking for a new home. Well, and then COVID-19 struck, and it definitely delayed plans, but it looks like he has found a home. Of course, it should be noted, Newton did graduate from Howard, so he is an HBCU graduate from Howard University. He will actually, you were going to say something?
And that makes him immediately eligible because he did graduate from Howard.
Right, so he's immediately eligible, but he is going to be a preferred walk-on for Auburn University, where his brother played. Now, I noticed I said a preferred walk-on because Auburn already has an 85-player scholarship list. So that's kind of one thing that's curious. But then the other thing I find curious, he's going to Auburn University where they had last year freshman Bo Nix, true freshman Bo Nix, led them to a 9-4 record, threw for over 2,500 yards, 16 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. All indications seem to be like Bo Nix is the kind of quarterback that Auburn is going to ride for the next 2 or 3 seasons. Has 2 years of eligibility, chooses to go be a backup. I don't understand it's an interesting decision, to say the least, AB.
Gus, this Cam. What's going on, Cam? I need a spot for my little brother to play. You got a spot there? Well, we done gave out enough scholarships. But I tell you what, we'll give a preferred walk-on status. So as soon as I cut one of these other jokers, he got some paper. All right. All right, bro. I appreciate it, Gus. All right, Cam. We holler.
Well said. Well said.
And imagine going to a stadium where there's a statue of your brother outside.
Hey, look, I mean, you can't run, you can't hide from who your brother is. So I'm sure there's a locker room. There might be the Cam Newton locker room in there somewhere or something. He probably got his name on some building or some function anyway. So
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. What's another? You came up with an interesting story, AD, about the XFL. I thought that league was done.
And so did everybody else. But looks like there are about 20 or so bidders trying to buy the XFL out of bankruptcy. And the significance of this is there were a number of HBCU players who were in the XFL, and it gives us another option for those who need to get some more film or some more seasoning to get some reps in, and then try to come back to the NFL a year or two down the line. Yes, the XFL has its troubles. We all know Vince McMahon wound up putting the thing in bankruptcy. You still got the Oliver Luck situation out there where he's suing them for $20 million. But there's a quote. I understand a debtor has modeled for 2021 a made-for-TV 12-week style tournament approach to this business. Since the XFL is particularly well-suited for a crowd-free experience that could thrive in the current environment, given its existing innovations such as in-game audio from players and coaches and live on-screen sports wagering information. No decision is made on the sale, expected to be made on the sale of the XFL until mid-September.
So this is
go ahead.
So this is somebody that would take the business away from Vince McMahon or go into partnership with him?
No, Vince McMahon put it in bankruptcy. The debtors or other people can buy the XFL out of bankruptcy. Vince McMahon has stated that he is not interested in keeping or purchasing the XFL out of bankruptcy.
Oh, okay.
Right. So this may be one of those people who he already owes it to, who may buy it, or this may be an outside bidder who's looking to buy the XFL. Also along XFL lines, there's this article on CBSSports.com saying the NFL needs a developmental league and rebooting the XFL is the perfect fit to improve league diversity and depth. So it's interesting to read. This article came out on May 27th on CBS.com. It talks about some of the innovations that the XFL had came. If you've been watching the NFL meetings, they talked about some of the rules that the XFL did, talked about implementing those rules, such as the sky judge and the onside kick, lack of onside kick and the 4th and 15 instead of the onside kick. We watched it for a few weeks, Brian. My favorite rule that actually came out of the XFL, the favorite play that came out of the XFL, was the kickoff. With the kicker down at the 40 or the 35, the other 10 players down on the 30, the offensive players on the 20, except for the one or two people who were back receiving the kick deep. Seemed like it took a lot of the injury and collisions away from the kickoff play, but still had the excitement of the kikkoff.
I like the no extra points, where you either have to go
1 to 2 to 3,
1, 2, or 3 from the 2-yard, 5-yard, or 10-yard line.
Yeah,
I thought that was genius. I thought that was really innovative.
That's the YMCA league model, except and the 3-point.
Because nobody can kick at that level.
They don't even ask for the kick. You going for 1, you going for 2, coach. We're going for 2.
The one thing about the kickoff thing, and you heard when I heard the NFL considering it, now, and correct me, you probably watch more than me, did the whole onside kick thing, did it actually originate? So the NFL was saying you could start from, I think you're 25 or 35, and instead of an onside kick, you get a 4th and 15 or a 1 down.
1 down to get 15.
Now, was it from the 25 though, or was it?
It was from the kickoff for where you would normally do a kickoff, right?
Which is like the 40.
It's the 35 in the league.
Okay, 35.
Yeah.
See, I think the NFL was trying to make it from the 25. And I didn't understand that because I'm like, that's crazy. Why would you do that? You know, that just seems like, why make it the 25? Why not make it the 35 or the 40? That way it seems like it's a more fair play, where if you don't get it and you give the ball to the other team right at that spot, you're not automatically giving points to the other team. Like if you set it at the 25 and you only get 10 yards, well, now you get the ball at the 35. Well, hell, that's one play and you're in field goal range. You probably already are in field goal range depending upon who your kicker is, right?
Right. I like it. It adds a little bit of element. What happens when you go onside and you throw a pick six?
Oh.
or even better.
Well, that's the same. It'd be the same as if you go onside kick and the guy recovers it and shoots off the. That's happened in college before, where there's been an onside kick, the guy got it and just kept running. It was like, oh man, nobody tackled the guy. Touchdown.
Right. Or even worse, they just throw a bomb with the onside kick. It beat you for a touchdown on the onside kick.
Right. Let's go to one or two other just conference news, notes, things, AD, and let's get into our last segment. So I was looking at this from out of the MEAC. The MEAC released, and this came from North Carolina A&T, I guess I should say that, where the Aggies announced the nation's best recruiting class in track and field. We don't normally talk about track and field a lot, but it's well known that North Carolina A&T has built one of the best track and field programs in black colleges, but maybe even one of the best in the country. Their men's track and field 2020 class has been given a grade of an A- from Mile Split United States. The class includes the #1 athlete in the country, as he will join a program that is the 4-time defending MEAC indoor champs and the 3-time defending MEAC outdoor champs. And that the young man who is considered the #1 athlete is a freshman. He'll come in as a freshman. His name is Raheem, and I want to say the last name. I think it's Hayles or either Hayles, Hayles. So
yeah,
probably Hayles. From out of Springfield, New York, went to Springfield Gardens High School. He is listed as the #1 athlete in the country. As a senior, he recorded 4 top 10 times nationally, including a minute 18.48 in the 600 meters, which is #1, 47.64 in the 400 meters, which was #3.
God.
I guess 103.81 in the 500 meters, which was #4, and 34.07 in the 300 meters, which was #6. And I'm assuming those are in the country. He won all 6 major metro track and field events in New York in the 500 meters, including the New York State Championship, the PSAL City Championships, the New York Millrose Games, the PSAL Queensboro Championships, the PSAL Martin Luther King Relays, and the PSAL Jim McKay Games. He finished the season undefeated in the 500 meters as a senior. That's pretty impressive, right?
Oh, by the way, he also won the javelin.
Yeah.
Footnote, he can throw too.
Yeah.
I got something interesting about track. Obviously, we know for outdoor track, everybody gets their year back. Do they get the year back in indoor track because indoor track season was over when the COVID hit.
I don't believe so. I think it only applies to
the spring
sports.
Right. So those ones. So that's going to be interesting for your track athletes who are used to transitioning, doing the indoor season and transition directly to the outdoor season. You're going to have a group of seniors who are not going to be able to participate in the indoor season this year, but are going to be able to participate in the outdoor season.
Oh, that's what. Yeah, that's an interesting question. Yeah, I would imagine you shouldn't be eligible in outdoor, especially if you consider it, since it is considered a second sport or a separate sport from indoor track. I can't imagine you'd be allowed that eligibility. How about you got any other news and notes? I saw there were some other things in here, AD, but I think because of time, I want to kind of get to our last segment. But if there's one other news and notes article that you wanted to mention, I'd give you that last shot.
No, well, since we're talking track, might as well CIAA track All-Americans. If you give me a second, I'll pull them back up.
CIA track All-Americans.
You know, we always want we always talking sports, but let's give these academics that do praise.
Are these academic All-Americans or just athletic All-Americans?
These are athletic All-Americans.
Okay, based on their performance on the field or track.
Correct.
All right, what do we got here?
And it's well, the too many to name, but just to give some. No, what I mean, there's a list up, but I will give you some of the ones that appear multiple times on here. For Fayetteville State, Jacqueline Brooks, she's on here multiple times, including the 4x4 and the 200. Maya Johnson for the open 400 and the 4x4. Philip Marcel in men's from St. Aug. Danielle Scantlebury from St. Aug in the women's 60 and in the 4x4. Now, I'm just trying to get some of the ones who appear on here multiple times. Kurt Modesti, I hope I'm saying that right, in the 200 and the 4x4 for St. Aug. Jalen Jones at the 400 and 4x4 for St. Aug. So those are some of the ones who appear on here in multiple events. So just wanted to hit those up right quick for us, Brian.
Do the and I'm not up on my track and field, but do Division II and Division I, do they sometimes compete in similar relays or at similar events and meets?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
Yes,
so it leads me to my second question. St. Augustine is considered one of the nation's best Division II programs. We've got North Carolina A&T as one of the best Division I programs. I'll be interested. Now, look, if you folks, if you're watching, you let us know. Do St. Aug and North Carolina A&T ever participate in a meet against one another,
or in the same meet somewhere?
Or in the same meet? I'm curious to see how those two programs match up against one another. That's just me. That's just me thinking off the top here, not knowing two flips about anything as it relates to track and field.
Right.
But we're working on that. Hopefully we'll. I made some contacts over the past several months or a few months related to track and field, and hopefully for the next school year, we'll be able to include some more track and field coverage into the BCSN.
Let's face it, shopping for insurance can be time consuming. That's why when it comes to your auto, home, and life insurance needs, make things simple and trust the experts at Allstate. They will help you get the coverage that fits your needs while helping you bundle your life, home, and auto policies. Bundling saves you money, sure, but it also saves you time, so you can enjoy the things that matter most even more. Contact me, Tammy Haynes, your local agent, for a free personalized insurance quote. Allstate, are you in good hands?
It's like a loop machine. All around town, people trying to get down.
All right, AD, the last segment we want to get to, we did last time, maybe 2 shows ago, we did some of our top 5 moments of the calendar year. This time we're going to go with top 5 classic football games from 2019. Now, I think there's an important distinction about classics, because I like to think of classics as neutral site locations where both teams are traveling, fan bases travel, you're benefiting that community with your resources or with your spending dollar value, and you're playing a good game, both bands attend. That's when I think of classics, that's what I think of. But we also have those other type of classics, right, AD?
Home games disguised as classics.
Right. Usually in honor of some famous coach or some
the Jake Gaither Classic, the John A. Barrett Classic for 2.
Pete Richardson Classic,
Turkey Day Classic.
Yeah, I think classics done to sort of memorialize certain legends. Okay, so that's how we decided to break up our top 5. I'm going to do the traditional classics. AD will do the home games disguised as classics. AD, why don't you go first with the home games disguised as classics? You give your top 5 first. No, wait a minute. Are we naming 5, or we actually have to count it down 5 to 1?
I counted mine down 5 to 1, and if
you always get me on this. All right, go ahead.
And if you give me a second, I will get my pull my notes out. All right.
Let me ask this a question. What is your parameters for this list?
I'm just matchup on the field. This has nothing to do with the atmosphere, nothing to do with the band. These were just of the games that were defined as classic in 2019. What were the best 5 games that we had on the field this past year, 2019?
Okay, fair enough. Fire away.
My number 5 home game disguised as a classic is the Carolina Classic. This occurred on September 14th of this past year and featured Johnson C. Smith versus Benedict in Columbia, South Carolina, in Charles W. Johnson Stadium. And this was a game of big plays. Johnson C. Smith, kick returner. Damon Rice returned 2 kickoffs for touchdowns for Johnson C. Smith. And Emmanuel Wilson also scored for Johnson C. Smith as they defeated Benedict 34 to 31. Exciting game, close game. What you expect in a good classic matchup. Johnson C. Smith came into Columbia, South Carolina, and beat Benedict in their own stadium on their classic. This number 5 on my list.
You mentioned Emmanuel Wilson, who just recently announced that he will be transferring to Fort Valley State after he left Johnson C. Smith as the CIAA Rookie of the Year. Didn't he run for some ridiculous number in that game?
Let's see, 83, 73, and 64.
Those were the touchdowns.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I knew he had a ridiculous game. That's why I wondered. So yeah.
Yes.
And that's where we kind of heard about Emmanuel Wilson. I think that was his first game where he kind of got on the radar.
Correct.
All right.
Right. All right. My number 4, and I just called this game out, would be the John A. Merritt Classic in Nashville, Tennessee. Cameron Rosenthal threw for 330 yards and a touchdown, included a 53-yarder to guess who? Chris Rowland, who only had 11 catches for 172 yards in that game. And then Tennessee State got 4 field goals from Antonio Zeta as they down Mississippi Valley State in Nissan Stadium in Nashville, Tennessee. My number 3 is going to be, and as my sheets got out of order here, you have to excuse me, Brian. Oh, here we go. The Raleigh Classic, Shaw 24, St. Augustine 21. This was the season finale for Shaw as they defeated St. Aug 24-21 at the George Williams Athletic Complex there in Raleigh, North Carolina. The Shaw Bears, they attended 7 at the half. Marquise Gorham broke away in the third quarter for a 56-yard touchdown, for 56-yard touchdown reception. Game went back and forth in the third quarter. Falcons scored on a 14-yard reception with 10:19 left as they took the lead 14-10 over Shaw at that point in the game. In the first 3 minutes of the fourth quarter, junior quarterback Torrin Campbell found an open tight end, Kevontae Moses, for Shaw to regain the lead. This game went back and forth down the stretch, which is what you want in the Classic. You want a dramatic fourth quarter. The first 3 quarters can be garbage. You want a dramatic fourth quarter. That's why this game is number 3 on my list, Brian. My number 2 game, the Labor Day Classic, featured Alabama State and the Tuskegee Golden Tigers. Alabama State scored early in the fourth quarter, 4th touchdown pass of the day for Kadarius Davis, who was 20 for 30 with the interception and 347 yards. That pass was complete to Michael Jefferson. Jefferson, who had 5 receptions on 174 yards. This, once again, another back and forth game. Tuskegee had the lead 24-23. There was a kickoff return for 99 yards, gave Tuskegee the lead 31-23. Then Alabama State made the comeback, tied it at 31 with a 2-point conversion, and then they won the game in overtime, if I do believe so. So that's what makes this game a classic. Anytime Tuskegee and Alabama State get on the same field, it's usually an instant classic. But my number 1 game, Brian, Virginia Union 16, Winston-Salem 15, and are you ready for this name? The Lucille M. Brown Community Youth Bowl.
Wow, okay. Love it. Love the name.
Yeah. Low-scoring game, but this game was infamously remembered for Jefferson Souza, who kicked the game-winning field goal with less than 20 seconds to play in a game where Virginia Union trailed the entire game until that field goal right there. Let's also remember Jefferson Souza was a person who they took the ball away from in the hole in the water bucket play at the end of the season. So, but this is that good game in which he actually kicked the field goal to give Virginia Union the win for what we then thought was going to be a good run by the by this Virginia Union team, who only lost to 3 teams that happened to make the playoffs in Division II football, all in their same region. Unfortunate for Virginia Union.
All right.
But
good,
Brian,
it's a good list, AD. That's a hell of a list.
But Brian, I'm not done.
Oh, you're not done?
I'm not done.
Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. Don't you want to save that? Are you going to do your? Don't no. Let's save that. Save that for us.
You sure you want me to say that? Okay.
Yeah. Are you talking about that other? You talking about the other five?
List? The other 5.
Yeah, no. Let me do mine. Let me do the classic. You just did the home games disguised as classics.
Right.
Now let me go actual classics. Okay.
And define what actual classics are for our peoples.
All right. So again, neutral site games where both teams have to travel. Okay. Nobody has a quote unquote home game. Okay. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to give my two honorable mentions because I actually came up with 7. Very hard to come up with just 5. And I think one of the key things that you brought to me, and you said, when I think classic, was it a classic? Did it have a good fourth quarter? Will it be something that you remember 3, 4, 5 years from now? Maybe even further, okay? So with that said, of my 7, my honorable mention games were the 36th Circle City Classic featuring Kentucky State and Jackson State. That was a game Kentucky State won 33-25. After trailing 10-0, they scored 33 straight points on Jackson State before Jackson State got a couple of fourth quarter touchdowns. It happened to be the second FCS win for Kentucky State, who's a Division II program in the SIAC. Finished the year 7-3 after being 0-10. I don't think, depending upon how Coach Charlie Jackson's career goes and Kentucky State goes, I don't think you're going to remember this game 5 years ago because it really was a beatdown. You're just going to remember the fact that Kentucky State beat 2 FCS teams with 7-3, and maybe it started them going in a direction where they became an SIAC powerhouse. Maybe, okay? My other honorable mention was the 91st State Fair Classic in Dallas between Prairie View A&M and Grambling. Prairie View A&M won 42-36. DeWanya Tucker, who's a Dallas, Texas native, ran for a single-game record of 263 yards and 2 touchdowns. Prairie View as a whole ran for 390 yards on Grambling that night. Grambling dropped to 0-4 at that point in the season, and Grambling would turn their season around after that. But that first month was pretty rough for Grambling. And still, I mean, they lost a game by a touchdown, but you had, 78 points of scoring, and you had a record game by DeWanya Tucker. So, I mean, that was pretty impressive. All right, so that's my honorable mention, okay, AD. Let's go to number 5. Number 5. Make sure I can pull it up here. All right. Number 5, Southern Heritage Classic played between Jackson State and Tennessee State. Now, this game was canceled a year before. The 2019 or 2018 version of this game was canceled. This one got off to a fireworks right from the get-go as both teams would return kickoffs, first play of the game, kickoff return for a touchdown. Second play of the game, kickoff return for a touchdown. That's how the fireworks started. Both teams would put up over 40 points. Jackson State would win 49-44 in that ball game. So, I mean, lots of points, lots of scoring, a great start in that game. But that's my number 5 game. Okay. Number 4. the 46th Bayou Classic in the what is it? The Superdome. I think it's what, the Mercedes-Benz Superdome at the time.
Superdome.
Yeah, in New Orleans, Southern, Grambling, the SWAC West Championship was on the line. The winner of that game would go on to play Alcorn State in the SWAC championship game. And Grambling was coming in as the hot team. If I'm not mistaken, 5 or 6 games in a row. I think 5. Excuse me. They had won 5. I think at that point, Grambling might have even been number 3, number 2 even in our poll. I know it had a lot of people like, how can Grambling? But at that point, I promise you, Grambling was playing as well as anybody in the country. If you take away what they did in the first 4 or 5 games of the season and looked at from October to that game, Grambling was playing as well as anybody other than Bowie State and North Carolina A&T. Outside of those 3 teams, in my opinion, the next best team was Grambling. Southern came into that game, and I didn't think Southern would win that game, but Southern ended up winning 30-28, thanks in large part to a blocked field goal late in the 4th quarter that ended up maintaining the lead and giving them the win. I think that block may have even happened in the final minute of the ball game. It turned out to be a great play. Actually, it was the second blocked field goal for Southern in that game. I think they blocked another one in the 2nd quarter sometime. Or no, they blocked it in the 3rd quarter. So they had 2 blocked field goals in the 2nd half, if I'm not mistaken. So that was a heck of a game for Southern. And, of course, it had the great finish at the end. 30-28 was the final score. Number 3, classic game number 3. How about the 40th? I think it might have been the 40th Florida Classic, or was it 39th Florida Classic, whatever. But it was the Florida Classic. Bethune-Cookman. If you recall the show a couple weeks ago, Top 5 Moments, this classic was my top moment of the year. So you may be wondering, how could a game that was your top moment not be your top classic game? Well, again, my top moment had to do more so with what that game meant to the Black college football season, and the fact that Bethune-Cookman, what they ruined. But in terms of just a game, it was a pretty good game. You had Bethune-Cookman had got out to a lead. FAMU rallied, retook the lead, and then on a 2nd and 25 or 3rd and 25, I think it may have been, Bethune-Cookman makes a great play, and then on an ensuing play coming out of it, scores a touchdown on a 15-yard run, and just like that, FAMU's lead is gone. Bethune has it, and then the interception, which turns out to be the 3rd year in a row for Ryan Stanley or FAMU in the final minute or 2 of the game to help Bethune win it. Lots of drama, great excitement in that game. There's only 2 games that I thought that had 2 classics that I thought that had more drama at the end of it than that game. Number 2. The 78th Magic City Classic, Alabama A&M, Alabama State. This was a game that it was raining, it was wet. Obviously, the weather conditions, did not play to having a large crowd. But still a good crowd on hand. Alabama State had got out to a great lead in the first half. They scored 21 unanswered points in the 2nd quarter, but then they would fail to basically score in the 2nd half and helped Alabama A&M tie the ball game up and send it to overtime. And that's where all hell broke loose in overtime, as I think everybody scored. Everybody scored a touchdown in overtime. First overtime, touchdown, field goal, touchdown, field goal. 2nd overtime, touchdown, field goal, touchdown, field goal. 3rd overtime, where nobody can get field goals, you got to go for 2. Alabama A&M scores, gets the 2-point conversion, Then Alabama State has a chance. They score the touchdown, but then on probably a very, you could call it controversial, or you could just say it was a great defensive play. The defensive back for Alabama A&M gets a deflection, and they preserve the 2-point win, 43-41 over their rival Alabama State. Jordan Bentley ran for 197 yards and 3 touchdowns on 39 carries for A&M. Kadarius Davis, he threw for 5 touchdowns in that ball game. It was just for watching that game, AD, and I think that game also was, there was another game that played that very same weekend. I can't remember what it was, but it was a good weekend for football. But that was a great game. Under bad conditions, turned out to be an exciting ending for Alabama A&M. So my number one classic for 2019 was actually a classic that took place the first weekend of the season, and it too involved Alabama A&M. The number one game was the Black College Hall of Fame Classic, the inaugural game between Alabama A&M and Morehouse College. This game was in Canton, Ohio, at the stadium right next to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. The first year, the game was broadcast on NFL Network. It was pretty much Alabama A&M had control of this game for the first, I'd say, 2.5 quarters, and then all of a sudden Morehouse woke up. Morehouse put in the backup quarterback and ended up tying the ball game, actually taking the lead, if I'm not mistaken. They took the lead 30-28. They rallied in the second half, took a lead, and they had us thinking, remember last year, Morehouse defeating Arkansas Pine Bluff to start the year. So all of a sudden you're thinking, man, Morehouse College coming out, taking out the slack, first game of the year, 2 years in a row. And then all of a sudden, Akil Glass showed why I maintain he was one of the best quarterbacks in the FCS last year, especially in Black college football last year. He led the Bulldogs on an outstanding drive, and then on a third down play with about about 7 seconds left. A lot of people, even the commentators, were thinking Alabama A&M were just going to kick a field goal, win the game by a point. Connell Maynard, head coach, turns it over to Glass, and Glass throws a touchdown pass to Brian Jenkins with 3 seconds left, and A&M wins that ball game in dramatic fashion, 35-30. Glass finished 28 of 44, 397 yards, 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. And I got to believe anybody who followed him that entire year, I think, you'd like to think maybe just a pro scout or two was watching that game. Akil Glass got on some radars, and, he's the reason why I maintain he was one of the top guys for the year. So what do you think about my top 5, AD?
Great top five. Your top, excuse me, your top 5 plus 2, as we like to call them. But excellent.
Where would you have ranked? Where would you have ranked your top true classic game? Who would have been your top game?
I didn't rank mine, and I've got them all listed here because I separated them out. I've really got to lean towards that Magic City Classic, that 3 overtime for my number one game.
Yeah.
3 overtimes, in the elements, in-state rival. It's kind of tough to beat that one.
I can't argue. Look, I like I said, that's why 1 versus 2 was very hard coming up with a 1 or 2. So yeah, I can respect that.
Yeah.
And I think those are games that you will remember a couple of years from now. And it's kind of interesting that Alabama A&M was involved in both of those because it was just like that. That was the kind of season Alabama A&M had. They had those, whether they were on the winning side or the losing side, they had some fantastic games that came down to the wire into the fourth quarter for them.
And speaking of Alabama A&M, and speaking of classics, I've got one more list for you, Brian. And that is
say that again. You got one. Wait a minute, say that again.
I've got one more list for you, Brian.
Oh, okay. One more list. Go ahead.
One more list. And Alabama A&M just happened to make honorable mention on this list. And this is the list of the disappointing classics of 2019. Why do I classify them as disappointing? You've got the classic matchup, you've got the teams, you've got the stadium, you've got the city, you've got the tailgate, you've got your cooler, and the game is garbage.
Okay.
You know, the honorable mention game was the Lewis Cruz, where UAPB was 52 and Alabama A&M 34. That was down in Mobile, Alabama, and that was Labor Day weekend of this past year. That was an honorable mention game. Now let's get to the 5 though. My number 5 game is a team that is near and dear to your heart and mine, and it is the Edward Water Tigers and Allen Yellow Jackets. Edward Waters 48, Allen 14 in the inaugural AME Classic. Both these schools are church schools that were started by the African Methodist Episcopalian Church. So why not come together and play the AME Classic? This game was also Edward Waters' homecoming. You could tell this was a homecoming game by their final score, 48-14. It was Edward Waters' first win on the season last year. One of only, I believe, 2 wins that they had all season long. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Brian.
I couldn't hear you. Say your paper was rustling there.
I'm saying, excuse me. I think that was one of only 2 wins that Edward Waters had on the season last year. Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Ooh, 2 or 3. I don't even know if they got the 3.
I don't think they got the 3.
You know what I remember about that game? I remember that game. I remember
you called that game.
Huh?
I said you called that game.
Well, yeah, but I remember the halftime show, and Allen brought a great crowd, but I just remember, usually during halftime, the band, the person who does the speaking for the band,
right?
Usually there's a little back and forth. You'll say some things about what your band is and what your band is not.
The little trash talking.
Yeah, it'll be respectful. I mean,
right.
It wasn't malicious, but I recall the announcer for EWC, their band. It was almost like Allen kind of talked a little bit of trash. They didn't know if they want to step their toe in that water, but since they stuck their toe in that trash top water, it got cut off and the whole foot got snatched by EWC's band announcer, to the point where, let's just say, the people from Allen and the people from Allen University were not pleased and had some serious complaints. There was, let's just say, there was no more announcing for the rest of the year at any EWC games for the rest of the year because of some of the. Yeah, because a little innocent trash talk, it happened, it did what it did, but that's what I remember about that game. So, yeah, a very disappointing classic indeed.
All right, well, we're gonna go with your summary on that. For that, I'll move on to my number 4 game. My number 4 game was the Upstate HBCU Classic, which was together.
Fort Valley State and Benedict.
Fort Valley State and Benedict in Greenville, South Carolina. After a pretty dismal first quarter, Fort Valley opened up a can of whoop in the second quarter, scoring 29 points as Slade Jarman led the way for Fort Valley. And this was over what we thought at that point in time was going to be a good Benedict team, who did not turn out to be so good, but this is early in the season. SIAC East matchup game between Benedict and Fort Valley. And little did we know at that point in time the woes that Benedict was going to have on the season. And that was the first time that Fort Valley scored 50 points in 2 years.
Wow. All right.
So that was my number 4. My number 3, garbage game, disappointing classic of the season.
Wait a minute. I was
Not
going to
garbage
say,
game.
you change it to garbage? Just
No,
wow.
that was wrong. I'll go back and edit that out. We'll call it a classic. The disappointing classic was the Chicago Classic.
Chicago.
Hampton 41, Howard 20.
The real HU.
The real HU. Mind you, we've got the 2018 Player of the Year, Kaylin Newton. We've got a D1 transfer at quarterback, DeAndre Francois, for Hampton. This was a game that was pretty much dominated by Hampton. Once again, little did we know what the future had to bring for Howard and the Ron Prince ship that was sinking at that point in time.
This is where this is where the first hole started to open up on the ship. After this
is where everybody started running to go get the buckets because everybody saw that there was a leak. Was doing this game. So little did we know that this is what we were gonna have here. My number 2 game, Albany, the Fountain City Classic, traditional rival Columbus, Georgia, Albany State, Fort Valley. Every year, this game 9 times out of 10 determines the SIAC East champion. Once again, it determines the SIAC East champion, with Savannah State being ineligible to play for the championship crown.
Yes, it did.
And Albany State scored 42 points against Fort Valley. Mind you.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, go ahead, AD. I'm sorry.
I say, if I remember correctly, either the week before or 2 weeks before, they won a game 7-3 or 7-2 against Benedict, baseball score.
Albany State, you mean?
Albany State.
Right.
Albany State is a ground and pound team.
But wasn't this the game that Slade Jarman got hurt, if I'm not mistaken, in the second quarter or something like that?
I do believe so.
Yeah. And Fort Valley State was rolling coming into this game.
Yes, Fort Valley State had one of the most prolific offenses in the SIAC at that point in time. You knew it was going to be offense versus defense, but
Jarman still won Offensive Player of the Year, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct, but the score was only 7-6 at halftime, Brian.
Yeah,
and without Slade Jarman, Albany State had nothing left in the tank at the quarterback position. So that's my number 2 game of the season. And my number 1 game, disappointing classic of 2019, was the St. Louis Heritage Classic with Lincoln, Missouri versus Kentucky State. You don't remember anything about that game in particular, do you, Brian?
Let me think. No, I don't. I don't remember too much about it.
You know why? Because the game was canceled. That's why it's the number 1 disappointing game of the season, because it didn't play it. And they didn't play it for – St. Louis has a dome, so we know it wasn't weather. It was for the promoters or whoever was putting on this game not doing what they were supposed to do to have this game. You've got Lincoln, Missouri, whose largest alumni base is in the city of St. Louis. You've got Kentucky State, who has a pretty decent alumni base in the city of St. Louis. You would think this would be a game that would draw close to 20,000 between these, at least 15,000 between these Division II schools. Lincoln, Missouri, 2 hours away. Kentucky State, just over 4 hours away. Very good driving distance. problem was, and St. Louis is my hometown, Brian. As I asked people about were they going to this game, no one knew that this game was going on, Brian.
Wow.
No one knew. Ticket sales were non-existent. Very
so
smartly.
Both teams had it scheduled,
yes.
But the promoters, who knows? Makes you wonder. Did the dome? I don't know what they call that dome in St. Louis. Did they know the game was supposed to be happening?
That might have been the only person who knew that game was supposed to be happening. And you would think that maybe after all this, maybe one of the schools would have decided to take it as a home game. Okay, we can't play at the dome, but you want to come to my place or I'll come to yours, and then we flip it next year? Nah, nothing, Ryan. They both only played 9 games.
No, Kentucky State played 10 games.
Okay, this was game number 11 for them.
Yeah.
Which also brings up something interesting. Kentucky State had a chance to wind up in the SIAC championship game,
right,
which would have put them into the playoffs, which means this game potentially could have got canceled anyway because this game was scheduled for November 23rd, which was the same day as the Florida Classic.
Right. Yeah, makes you wonder. Had they somehow found a way to beat?
They had to beat Tuskegee. No, they lost to Tuskegee early. They had to beat Miles.
Right, they lost to Miles, but had they beaten Tuskegee early in the year, who knows what would have happened?
Yeah. So it's interesting. They were 1 win away from being in contention. Had they beaten the Miles or Tuskegee, they would have been in contention for the West Division crown.
Correct. All right, good stuff, AD. You guys out there, let us know your thoughts on our top 5 classic games. Share your thoughts. What was your top classic game for the 2019 year? And it could be, what I consider the neutral site, or it could be what we call the home game disguised as classic. Let us know your thoughts as well. All right, that's going to do it for this show. It's been a heavy show. We try to find something to talk about, even though we are without a lot of sports games. Want to remind you guys, be safe out there. A lot of things going on in the world, not just COVID-19, but we got other stuff going on. So keep your head on a swivel. Be safe. Be considerate of other people. You don't have to get in other people's business. Let them do what they do, and we'll all get along. One day soon, sports will be coming back. It'll eventually get there, but we're just gonna have to remain patient and be considerate of each other's time and space. Again, if you're watching us on YouTube, on MyJBN Online, please make sure to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the network YouTube feed, on our Facebook pages, BCSN Sportswrap or Black College Sports Network. Make sure you join our page, and so you can get alerted whenever we drop new shows or stories or whatever else. And of course, make sure you're following us on Instagram, Twitter, and Periscope at MyBCSN1. That's MyBCSN, the number 1, is where you can find us. And connect with Drew. You can find him on Twitter at BCSNDrew, and connect with me at DRB365. Got some interesting shows. I had a great conversation coming up with the director and producer of a documentary featuring the legendary Jake Gaither. So I'll be sharing that conversation a little bit later in the week. So outside of that, anything else you got going on, AD?
No, got some things coming up. Gonna have an interview in the next couple of weeks with a former NFL player who played at a HBCU. I don't want to get the name away yet, but he's has an interesting story, has some interesting stats, and has done a lot of good things. So I'm working on that interview right now. We should have that within the next couple of weeks. Just trying to stay busy in this world of sports. If you've got an idea for a top 5 that you want to see Brian or myself put together, at BCSN Drew, at DRB365. Hit us up on Twitter. Let us know what it is, and we'll see if we can fit it in up to one of our top 5 that we have this week, this summer. Also, last thing I want to say, please, peaceful protests, don't loot.
All right. Well said. For AD Drew, I'm Brian Fulford. Thanks for watching the BCSN Sports Wrap. Take care of yourselves. Peace out.
I'll holler.
But ear my beats, they are hard.